Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webcast. So, as Natalie said, I'm Sever Apostu. I work in the Information Security Sales Consulting team in the EMEA Pre-Sales Center. I'm actually based in Bucharest, Romania. And the topic I'll be covering during today's webcast is around the use of security as a business enabler for mobile, cloud, and social platforms. Together with me is Anthony Swart. He is a principal sales consultant based in the UK. He'll be answering a lot of your questions, which I'm sure will come up, and he'll also be supporting my webcast. Right, so before we go any further, I just need to show you the usual legal disclaimer slide. Now, a couple of words about our agenda today. First, we're going to look at why is mobility important, because mobility is something everyone is talking about at the moment. I'm having lots of conversation with a lot of people, a lot of customers in the industry that want to know about mobility. So just to understand what the big hype is all about mobility at the moment. The second one would be to look at what the security implications are. So we said that mobility is important, but actually what are the things we should be talking about? Are there the same concerns you would normally get with any other sort of identity and access management information security type projects, or are there different challenges? And finally, we're going to take a look at some of the ways we can address some of these challenges. And as Natalie said, we will have time for a Q&A session, but if you have any questions, then by all means fire them in a chat window, and either Anthony will answer them on the spot or he will pick them up and answer them at the end. So, taking the first topic, why is mobility so important? You can go for yourself on the internet and have a look at so many reports at the moment with various stats and information that really show that mobile is becoming predominant. So here's just one particular statistic that I picked up from a Morgan Stanley research report. It's actually quite a couple of years old, but actually if you go and look at today's up-to-date information, you would see that it's pretty much the same. What's basically saying is that mobile is becoming the predominant channel. Because the Morgan Stanley research report is from a couple of years ago, they estimated that the turning point between desktop versus mobile is actually occurring right about now. So between now and next year, it will be about 50-50, and then as you see on the graph, it's going to start increasing, and mobile will be the actual channel of choice. So what does actually mean to you as an organization? Well, what it means is, firstly, that your customers are more likely to be accessing your services via their mobile devices, and also it means that your employees are more likely to be accessing your enterprise systems using mobile devices. Obviously, when we're talking about mobile devices, we're talking about both smartphones and tablets and all kinds of devices. So mobile is not going away, that is for sure, and in fact it's going quite the other way. Okay, so just to quantify some of these figures and sort of scale what we're talking about here. So firstly, you can see the 83 versus 22 statement in there. What it says is that 83% of enterprise IT leaders see mobile as strategic for their organization, whether that's for the customer base or for the employee base. For the moment, though, only 22% have a strategy around mobile. So it would be interesting to understand within your own organizations, do you know if you have a mobile strategy at the moment? So is it something that you're aware of? Is it something that you as an organization are thinking at the moment? Is that strategy more focused on employees, or is it just focused on the customers? These are very natural questions, and these are questions that you need to be thinking about within your organization to understand actually on the overall mobile journey where you currently are. Now, that's a fairly big number here, 10 billion. The research behind it suggests that by 2016 there will be 10 billion smart devices on the planet. So that's a big customer base to try to address, and it's a large number of employees with devices also that will be trying to access your enterprise systems. Here's another interesting statistic saying that in terms of traffic on the internet, mobile has grown over 125% over the last year compared to desktop. So the figures are actually suggesting that mobile is becoming predominant, and these are actually backed up by the fact that traffic is showing that as well. Also, at a conference that Gartner held a couple of weeks ago, they actually suggested that by 2020, 80% of user access will be from mobiles or from non-PC devices. So as you can see here from all these figures, there is a massive explosion in terms of use of mobile devices. Okay, so you may as well ask me, what does that mean for an organization? What does that mean for my organization? Well, in my view, it means that you need to start thinking about a mobile-first strategy, or at least that mobile should be an absolute key part of your strategy. Because actually, if you think about it, the dominance of mobile really means we need to shift our thinking. There's lots of benefits from adapting the mobile approach. It means that we can start to think about applications per function, for instance, or per role. So rather than having a big, wide, all-encompassing enterprise application on the desktop, we can actually build mobile apps, and the apps could be could have very specific functions or very specific roles within an enterprise system. For instance, let's pick a large enterprise system inside of which we can have an application that covers just expenses or just time and attendance, and so on. It also means that I can start taking advantage of some of the real benefits of the mobile channel. So it means I can, for instance, start to look at things like how I use my location awareness, for instance, how I use the device capabilities, things like the camera or other gadgets that I have on my device. And all this become a way to improve the experience for the user to make the application more intuitive to the end user. And this is pretty much one of the main goals when it comes to mobility. So these are things that are available when we compare that with their desktop equivalents that are quite limited in terms of capabilities. On the flip side of that, because there is one, so the flip side of that is that actually means that things like usability become more and more important. No longer they are just an option. It's actually something that became a must. So you really need to start thinking about things like appearance and usability of your applications. And this would be quite important, especially on the customer side, because if the customers don't like your application, they will simply not use it. They will use your competitors, your competition's application, or they will simply use some other application out there. So there are pretty much other things you need to be thinking about, things like over-the-air considerations. So pushing out updates for your application over the network, how that affects things like data roaming and costs. And we need to start to think about these sort of things in this new mobility era. you also have to recognize very quickly that the app that you put out there on the App Store will become part of your brand. So you need to make sure that you get it right. You need to make sure that it's consistent with the rest of your brand messaging for your organization. The other consideration is that there's not just one device out there, and I suppose this is quite a good analogy with the browser compatibility issues we saw years ago, where you had some apps that would work on Firefox and Safari, and some other applications that would not work on things like Internet Explorer, for instance. We pretty much have the same challenge here. We have lots of different choices that are very diverse, that have different capabilities, a lot of devices out there. So it's really about understanding and taking advantages of all the platforms that you need to. Sorry. So devices are only going to get smarter. They're only going to get more intelligent. So that's going to allow us to take advantage of these new capabilities, more applications, more engaging. Uh, we will obviously make them faster, more interesting to use, which is really the exact opposite of what we're saying with desktop applications. Of course, maybe I'm a little unfair saying that the Windows type application on your right, as you can see from the slide right now, is quite old and antique and so on. Desktop type applications have moved on a long way, but even so, they're not, and they will probably never be as intuitive and as usable as you will see in a mobile application. So a very good example of the use of mobility is around social networking. For me, these things go hand in hand. Whenever we're talking about utilizing mobile, it's really about improving the customer experience by engaging the customer earlier, and it's pretty much about making their experience more seamless. Uh, Social sign-on, in my opinion, the key part of that process. So you've all seen websites like the one that you are currently seeing where you get a registration form and there they ask you everything, including your things like your pet's name, your mother's maiden name, and so on. Now, this is one of the most common reasons people will drop off websites, and or pretty much they will even stop transactions on a website just because of that. If you get halfway through buying something, let's say, and all of a sudden you get a registration page on which you get to fill, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 fields, that's certainly going to put you off. So we see this very, very commonly across so many different websites but actually where things start to change is that, for instance, if you look at the screenshot on the right, we start to get the ability to use social networking. So now rather than asking the user to fill all these forms, we pretty much allow the user to take advantage of their existing social networks. So what we're doing is, and what we are encouraging everyone to do is to take the information from their social networks and to make the process easier for the user. From an end user point of view, it's absolutely great. They're not filling lots of information. They already fill their data on Facebook, Google, or LinkedIn. So why not reuse that? It means pretty much for a user that he's in control of the data, but it also means that from an organization, there's a number of benefits. For instance, I can get the identity of the user earlier within the process and not presenting him with a big cumbersome registration form that will obviously put off the user, so there's a less chance that the user is going to drop off transaction or leave the site. It also means that data I get about the user is likely more accurate, with at least things like the name and email address more likely to be correct. It also then means that you can start to use social networking for things like target marketing, and there's a lot of additional customer experience capabilities attached to that. Now, from a security perspective, what we start to see is that the registration forms go away, and instead we get the option to actually log in with either username and password or one of the pre-existing social accounts. So, for instance, once I decide to do that as an end user, I will be asked to log into that social site. If I'm not already logged in, and then I will be asked permission to release my information to the organization that's requiring it. So it's pretty much putting me as a user in control of my data, but it's also allowing me to share that with an organization and therefore to reduce my effort with things like registration, for instance. A large number of benefits we can get from using social sign-on. If we think about mobility in general and mobility and social going hand in hand, then foreign registration, it actually presents a great opportunity. From a mobile point of view, we can take advantage of this growing mobile user base. There's a number of customers out there that don't use desktops at all, and this is a fact. They don't have computers at home. They want to get purely, they pretty much want to use nothing but tablets for fun as well as for work. So by embracing the mobile channel, we can get hold of this growing customer base. It also means that by using the mobile channel, we can get things out to the market quicker. It means that we can start to push more services through the channel, and that at the same time we can take advantage of the advanced capabilities on the devices and to start to improve the user experience. So the user will actually want to use the application. You know as well as I do, you will always use the application that's more intuitive, that's easier to use, that's quicker to use, the one that takes advantage of your location, for instance, the one that can use your camera and so on. So there are definitely growing opportunities if and only if you get it right. If we look at it from a social perspective, it means that we can engage our users earlier if we can take away that painful registration process by letting the user log in via Facebook or Google or whatever their favorite social network is. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that we all should get rid of login forms and usernames and passwords and just use login via Facebook. There are challenges associated with that, and that's what we're going to be talking about next. So what are the security implications? So yes, mobile is fantastic. It's a great channel presenting great opportunity to us. But there are different security challenges associated with mobile and social that we don't necessarily get from the traditional channel we are accustomed with. Let's look at some of these. So the first one for me basically is lost. It's way easier to lose a mobile device than, say, a laptop or a desktop. If that mobile device is the gateway to access information within your organization, think about the case of bring your own device, for instance, where you can bring your own device to work, then that becomes a challenge through a security perspective. So how do I make sure that that device doesn't get lost and then used to access information within the organization? The next big one is stolen. So we've seen the same thing happening with laptops. It looks like a bigger problem when we're dealing with mobile devices. Two main reasons for that, pretty much. The first one is that phones are not cheap devices. If you look at the latest iPhone that just came out a couple of months ago, they're around 600, 700 pounds, which makes them very lucrative targets for thieves. They're very, very small, very, very lightweight, very easy to steal. But there's also another angle to this that has become quite interesting in the last couple of years. Since mobile devices became these days the gateway to access corporate information, they can actually become targeted to be stolen. This is actually what we're seeing nowadays. So thieves are doing it. We are seeing employees or organizations being targeted to get to sensitive information for employee devices. Another interesting challenge is looking at where our data sits. So, for instance, out of the sudden, if we got mobile devices accessing data, whether it's customer-facing or employee-facing, typically the information will be accessed over the internet. This means that we have to expose particularly sensitive information out to the internet. What we need to start considering is what are the implications of pushing out information onto public network that was typically previously sitting within our private network somewhere in the back of our firewalls. And lastly, we have malware on the list. So malware has been around for a long time, but obviously we're seeing big threats around security devices. And as you can see from a statistic in 2012, Android is by far the more targeted platform. Again, something to keep in mind when building mobile applications and exposing information, sensitive private information through this new channel. So let's look at some of the challenges we need to be thinking about. The first one is security. We have a whole lot of devices out there, but depending on whether you're working in the corporate space or you're looking at the customer space, the split between devices is very, very different. At the moment, the corporate world is by far very iOS centric, while the consumer world is by far Android centric. So either way, irrespective of what device, from a security perspective, we have a whole array of devices out there, and we need to start thinking about the capabilities of each device in terms of security, the threats of the threats to each device, depending on the operating system and so on. When we start looking at the security of mobile applications, typically we can't use any existing security that we have. So, for instance, most organizations have a wide range of security out there with things like web access management, securing web services, user directory, and so on. But chances are that you probably can't use that on your mobile platform. These are things we need to be looking at when dealing with security for mobile applications. Device control is also quite important. With employees, if you're issuing phones out, we may get more control over the user's device, for instance, to only install certain applications that we know are certain, that we know are trusted, and so on. But we certainly cannot do that with customers. We cannot control what applications are installed on our customers' phones. And also with this new move towards bring your own device, which is becoming more and more prevalent in the market, this type of locking down people's devices is really not an option. So as an organization pushing information out there, we have quite limited device control. From a compliance perspective, what we have to make sure is that we are only providing the right information to the right people and at the right time. So the big question we're asking from a security perspective is how do we centrally manage security by not coding it separately for mobile application, but by reusing the existing security infrastructure while still remaining compliant. And this is a big challenge. The next challenge is around user experience. So traditionally we're probably talking about web-based applications, web-based single sign-on, which are pretty much very mature technologies. You log in into one application, you don't have to log in into anymore. So you may have, at the moment, you may be using enterprise single sign-on, so you can do this, so you can access all your applications on your desktop, but the moment you will start to use mobile applications, you will get a completely different challenge, since there is no native single sign-on, and this is a big challenge. Consider pretty much this important statistic. Organizations aren't writing just one application. So a good example of this statement is if you go right now and look at your app store and try to search for Sky. Sky as in the TV channel. And you'll notice that they've put a whole range of different applications out there. Some are free to use, like Sky News, etc. Others where you can watch TV on the go, like Sky Go and so on. The problem is that all these applications require you to log in. From a user experience point of view, at the moment I log in into each of those individually, that will pretty much turn my experience into a terrible user experience, because I am so very used to having single sign-on within traditional web channels. So why should it be different when it comes to the mobile channel? Related to the native single sign-on challenges are the passwords help desk calls. So we are seeing a lot of organizations who are actually seeing an increase in help desk calls because users try to log into their native apps. They forget their passwords, and thus they are made unable to log in. The statistic is that around 50% of help desks worldwide are struggling to keep up with mobile applications, and lots of that is related to credentials, to very mundane things like forgotten passwords and problems with logging in. Finally, if we are not careful, we can end up with a very inconsistent login experience. If let's say I'm one user with one identity, why should I try to log in to different sites with different credentials, whether it's a native application or a website or web application? Because as a customer, I do not care about these things. I only see the whole picture as one channel, and I feel that it's certainly not my fault that technology sees it as different channels. So when we think about mobile and social, it's pretty much about how we improve user experience, and as a side effect, how we improve productivity. What about the challenges a developer has? So, for instance, if I'm writing a native mobile app, I'm going to have to code security into each of my applications. But the problem is that typically, as a developer, I'm not a security expert. So this is not my job. My job is to build business logic and business functionality into an application. Security is a complex area. You have to look at things like cryptography, things like managing keys, managing encryption, securing storage, securing transmissions, and so on. So if you have developers that are not experts in the field, you will end up with pretty much longer development cycles and guaranteed weak security. Again, with different developer teams, for instance, you have some in-house developer team, you have some contracted developer team, some third-party software house, and so on. All existing applications that those teams will be created. So chances are that they're going to implement the same things, but they're going to do it slightly differently. Hence, there's a big chance of inconsistent login experience. So one major thing we need to think about is how to simplify application development while not cutting back on the security. The next set of challenges is one that I think a lot of people forget about, and this is around information access. If, let's say, I have an application out there that is a very standalone application and just provides information within it, it's probably an application of very limited value. We will get real value from an application that can interact with an organization's resources, that can exchange information, that can perform transactions. That's where the real value comes from. And the application needs to connect to some central services in order to get that information. And pretty much this model is the same for all organizations. So in order to do that and to do it securely, we need to secure the endpoints so that we can provide access from anywhere at any time, but while making sure we do that for the right people. We also don't want to be using very heavyweight protocols when exchanging information because they do incur data roaming charges. So we need to take that into account as well. This is another major point that needs to be taken into consideration when dealing with mobile applications. So when looking at information, we need to figure out how do we make that information that's available internally, probably not in the right format or the right level of security. So how do we make it available into an interface that's lightweight, secure, and can be easily consumed by these mobile applications? And finally, the last set of challenges is around social access. All different social networks are based on standards like OAuth or OpenID to enable this exchange of information between the social network site and the local site that pretty much is requesting it. Although there are a couple of standards out there, the problem is that the implementations are slightly different. So this type of integration with each social provider needs to be coded within your application. Also, we need to take into account the following situation. We need to link the account that's coming from a social provider with an existing local account within the organization in order to prevent a disconnect between accounts or people having multiple accounts, one of them being local and the others being provided by social network identity providers. There's a large number of providers out there, and this also means that at times we can get the conclusion that there is a lack of trust in this type of login, this type of setup. For instance, I'll give you a very short example. I can go on Facebook and I can create an account for, let's say, David Cameron. I can sign up an account on Gmail for David Cameron and use them together. So for all intents and purposes, Facebook thinks I'm David Cameron. This means that using a social login for things like home banking, so a home banking application would probably be a good idea, but we can still use social networking as a good step in the door to get people through the door and then to take control of their session beyond that. So pretty much, really, it's about taking advantage of the capabilities offered by the social media platforms. So now, The next point is to talk about how do we address these challenges. There's a number of things we need to put in place in order to address all of these challenges mentioned above. What I'm going to do now is to tell you what Oracle's approach in this space is. I'm not going to focus on the entire platform. I'm just going to focus very much on security. It's worth to know that within Oracle we have what we call the Oracle Mobile Platform, which is one consistent platform for building, deploying, managing mobile applications. Pretty much on any device that needs access to enterprise information. This platform is built on 5 different areas, and you can see the first of them on the slide. Firstly, it's the develop cycle. So the platform supports multiple devices as part of a multi-channel strategy and allows you to build an application once and then use it across multiple devices. It also supports different things like the mobile web, native applications, hybrid applications, and so on. The second building block of this platform is the integrate cycle that enables you to get that data out there to your mobile application and to take customers within your enterprise systems. The secure part is the bit we'll be focusing on security that provides a complete set of capabilities around mobile identity and mobile application management to make sure that the right users have access at the right time. And then we have the deploy and manage cycles that handle the life cycle of the applications and also the infrastructure that underpins those applications. A lot of information out there, so where to start? Well, for me it starts with identity. If we're talking about mobile applications, user access information, we can't do any of that unless we know who the person is. So really the focus for me is what capability do I need in order to deliver those mobile applications in a secure process. From a mobile access management point of view, we need to start thinking about some of these things about bridging the gap that exists between traditional identity and access management and mobile devices. We also need to start thinking about more than just standard authentication mechanisms, things like username and password, because there's more risk because we talked about devices being stolen or lost and so on. So we need to start talking. We need to start talking about taking the device into account, taking things like the location into account, looking at behavior patterns around users and devices and so on in order to support this new mobile channel. We need to start looking at securing those APIs as well, the APIs being the interfaces that we offer to our actual internal systems. And because of the ever-increasing bring your own device organizational behavior, we need to start looking at registering devices, knowing who owns what device, and so on. We also need to think about single sign-on. We need mechanisms in place that will allow us to do single sign-on across mobile applications or across a mobile application and a web application. And on top of them, we need a platform that has the visibility and control for all these capabilities so that actually I can see who's logged in from what device and what they're doing and so on. Now, From a social perspective, we need to think about how we turn social integration from a coding exercise into a administrator exercise. So into something that we call the tick box configuration. So no need for coding, just some proper administration in place. This will allow us pretty much to take the integration out of the application code and to make it easier to add, for instance, new providers and things like that. We talked earlier about the lack of trust in social network login. So if we're not going to allow people to do sensitive transactions based on their Facebook login, let's say, we do need some sort of a mechanism to get them to the right level of authentication before we let them do the more sensitive transactions. So we need to look at things like the step-up authentication, for instance, and finally we need to support all the relevant standards and pretty much all the standards that are used within the social networks to do the interrogations. Standards like the OAuth, the Federation, OpenID, and so on. So what I got in mind is and the things I've been telling you about is exactly what Oracle has done with our existing identity and access management platform. What we've done is to enhance our existing platform to provide mobile and social capabilities. I'm going to very quickly run through those. We talked about them on previous slides. So first we have the single sign-on. So within identity and access management, we can provide single sign-on between native applications as well as between native application and web-based application, so that we actually do improve the user experience. So for instance, the user logs into an application once, then he doesn't have to log into the other applications that are contained in the same domain. In my opinion, this is critically hard to do and critically powerful when we're talking about mobile and social. And frankly, I see no way of doing mobile and social without single sign-on. Secondly, it's vital to support standards like the one needed to enable social login and to turn things into a tick box configuration rather than a coding exercise. So all you have to do as an administrator is to decide which identity provider you want to use and to put the proper controls in place, and you're done. No need for coding. No need for anything additional, just that. We also need to be able to do the step-up authentication, so that, for instance, we can do the things I mentioned earlier, log in using our Facebook account, and then stepping up the type of credentials we're providing in order to do the more sensitive transactions. So for that, we are using a risk engine that allows a user to log in using a social login at a very, very low level of trust. And then that particular user would need to raise the level of trust. So we step that up, we provide a risk evaluation, and we decide how we want to authenticate the user. API security. There are quite a lot of mechanisms that allow us to secure the APIs being the interfaces to our internal systems. And we're going to talk a bit later on about that. And finally, after authentication, we need to provide authorization. We need to make sure that a user is actually allowed to access a certain resource. So let's talk a bit about step-up authentication. I mentioned it a couple of times. Just let's see if we can go into a bit more detail. So as you can see in this slide, we can grab in terms of information, anything from a username and password. We can do the social login in the second screen, whether it's on your desktop or in your phone. We can do things like providing additional challenges, asking people for pre-register questions, or even sending one-time codes to people's phones or email addresses and so on. So there's a quite a large number of things from which we can choose, and we can actually do that from juggling with configuration. We can choose from configuration what options we want to allow the user to use in order to authenticate themselves. Moving on, I promised I'll be talking more about securing the APIs. So what we need to be able is to provide information that later on will be consumed by these mobile applications. That information is not necessarily always in the right needed format, is not always secure to the right level we want it. So we need to put the correct controls in place to allow us to do that. We need to secure the APIs. We need to put some authentication and authorization around our APIs. We need to look at things like threat protection to make sure there's no malicious content that's coming through those APIs into our internal systems. If necessary, we might need to transform the data, and I'll give you a very, very simple example. So, for instance, we may need to take a SOAP service and translate it on the fly to something that's more consumable, more easy by mobile devices. And all the things you can see here, we can do that within the Oracle mobile platform. We can put control and we can put governance around our APIs, so we can see exactly who's using them, exactly when they're using them, and what APIs are used, which are the ones that are preferred by customers, and other controls around that. And all that integrates perfectly well with the platform, with the overall platform. So actually we have one common platform that does the authentication, one common way in which we will do authorization and so on. Okay, so what we end up with essentially is two entry points into an organization. So you will end up with a traditional entry point, which is your web server or your web applications, which have their own policy enforcement points, and then you have your API access facilitated through the API gateway. So both of these components talk to a common access management platform at the back end, and that's what's providing the decisions around authentication and authorization, and also that's what's controlling things like single sign-on between different platforms. That's on the let's say organizational side. On the mobile side, this aspect is facilitated by having the security agent that deals with the interactions between the mobile applications and the security capability needed on the access management platform. To summarize, for me, mobile and social gives us a great opportunity within the market. So it gives us a chance to try and move out not just our existing just our existing software into the mobile space, but also to address new markets. So using the access management platform, we can get our information out there quicker into the mobile channel. We can write applications much quicker. We can use the lifecycle management to get them out there much quicker. We can make development quicker. The development does not need to worry about the security of the application. We will take care of that for them. Also, through the operational controls, we get better visibility. We can see who's using our APIs, and we can pretty much enforce service level agreements to make sure we're getting the right level of service to our customers. Through the security controls, we can reduce the level of risk because we can start to look at risk level access, things like context-based access, and we are pretty much taking security out of individual services and putting it onto a common platform for better transparency, better agility, and in the end, better accountability. Finally, we can reduce costs because we're not doing it every single time for every single application we're shipping out there. We're not doing it bespoke, and because all of it sits on an existing platform that already a number of customers have deployed. So this is pretty much a great advantage. Now, moving on to the Q&A session. Anthony, any questions out there?
So Sever, yeah, just I think you've touched on this already a little bit, but a lot of customers do have identity and access management solutions out there. So is this kind of building everything from the ground up again, or can you build on top of existing infrastructure, and how does that sort of work?
Well, yeah, absolutely. You can do that. You can build on top of existing infrastructure. I actually touched a bit more on the topic during the presentation. But to be honest, I think you can tell us more about the subject. I know you're way more knowledgeable about it than I. Anthony?
For a sec, so
Anthony, I think we're hearing you intermittently at the moment.
yeah, sorry, I seem to have dropped off for a second there. So
yeah, we didn't hear the beginning of your reply.
so sorry about that. So yeah, I suppose just any other questions? I suppose the only other thing I was thinking about was in terms of mobile devices. So I guess a lot of people, it's kind of bring your own device. So they may be a little bit nervous about using corporate controls and corporate policies on their mobile devices. Do you have anything that you can do around that as well?
Absolutely, there are things that can be done for that. Obviously, we're not talking about locking in a user's phone. So yeah, absolutely, you can deal with the precise application that's being installed from your employer, let's say. So, for instance, the moment you decide to leave the company, or the moment, let's say, someone steals your phone, or you lose it, or whatever, there are steps that can be taken in order to make sure that the information contains that first of all, your device is not able to access any more information, and all the information that has already been obtained by that device and possibly cached will be removed, so that there's absolutely no security risk whatsoever.
Okay, but you don't affect the user's phone, so I mean, the user doesn't...
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. Just the particular the particular application that was installed through the use of the app store provided by the employer.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it for me. I don't know, any questions from anyone else as well?
No, it looks as though there aren't any, but so I think it's time for us to round up. So thanks very much, Sever and Anthony, and particularly to Sever for a great presentation, very informational. If there's more of these in this series at the website that you can see here, you can also use that website for further information or contact us, and the replays as well. The replay should be up on there sometime in the next couple of days. Thanks everyone for attending. Good to see you all here, and may hopefully see you on another webcast.